saw Jim Jordan run just unopposed in a secret ballot, and 55 Republicans said they just wouldn't vote for him. There's just too many Republicans that wouldn't want him to be Speaker of the House, and with good reason. He, of course, is very close to Trump, has this very pugilistic style of politics, of basically derailing and opposing things, has absolutely no record of using consensus or trying to get people to come together. So he would be a very terrible choice for Speaker. They need to come up with somebody who's probably more moderate and committed to governing. But then, of course, the problem is that the extreme right wing of the Republican Party will derail that. They have absolutely no problem with this going on for weeks, if not months. So it's difficult to see a way forward. Maybe they'll allow the caretaker, Patrick McHenry, to stay in this role a little bit longer. But then, of course, that leads to more problems with what's going to happen with the budget. There isn't a way forward with cooperating with the Democrats, though some people have thought that might have been a possibility. But apparently, Republicans have stated that that's not really that doesn't really have much a chance of working out. So what I think we're going to see is many weeks of wrangling within the Republican Party until a suitable candidate comes forward, and I'm not sure who that's going to be.
Yeah, I don't think they're very sure either. So can Republicans ever move forward on this issue or any other issue, whatever the far-right element within the GOP, apparently led by Matt Gaetz, remains in the party? And is there anything the moderates in the GOP can do about that rogue element? Because this is going to impact them, presumably, unless people have very short memories, by the time we get to the presidential election next year.
It is going to impact them, and I'm not sure what the moderates can do. I mean, the one thing they could do, but I don't see this happening, would be to go independent and to make deals with the Democrats. But we've already heard that's not likely to happen. What has ended up happening is that they've made concessions to the right-wing elements of the Republican Party, and they've really made too many concessions. And this is how we got ourselves in this mess in the first place, because Kevin McCarthy agreed that basically one person could oust him, could nominate to have him unseated. And that creates a situation where you just don't have enough party discipline and party unity. And so we're seeing the fraying, as I mentioned, of the Republican Party. There needs to be some discipline of the party in order for it to govern. And right now, they're not in that type of place.
Well, let's hope voters are watching all of the detail here. And remember, by the time they have to cast their ballots in November 2024, we shall see. Natasha Lindstad, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your analysis. Appreciate it, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Well, exit polls show Poland's populist ruling party is set to lose its parliamentary majority after Sunday's hard-fought election. The opposition bloc, led by former Prime Minister Donald Tusk, appears on course to gain control if it strikes deals with smaller parties. The results of this election are expected to have major ramifications for Poland, the balance of power in the European Union, and the future of the war in Ukraine.
We did it, really. I know that our dreams were even more ambitious, but I will tell you, I have been a politician for many years. I am an athlete. I have never been so happy with this supposed second place in my life. Poland won, democracy won.
Well, now to Afghanistan, where a 6.3 magnitude earthquake struck the western part of the country Sunday morning, just days after a series of strong quakes hit the same region. Officials say at least 50 people were injured in Sunday's earthquake. Taliban government officials estimate more than 2,000 people were killed in an earlier tremor on October 7th, most of them women and children. Well, still to come, inside the nightmare day, the Be'eri kibbutz was attacked by Hamas. We will hear from one resident.
There it is. That feeling you get when you can do more with less asthma. It starts with Dupixent. Dupixent is not for sudden breathing problems. It's an add-on treatment for specific types of moderate to severe asthma and can help improve lung function for better breathing in as little as 2 weeks. Dupixent helps prevent asthma attacks and can even reduce or eliminate oral steroids. Can you picture it? Dupixent can cause allergic reactions that can be severe. Get help right away if you have rash, chest pain, worsening shortness of breath, tingling, or numbness in your limbs. Tell your doctor about new or worsening joint aches and pain or a parasitic infection. Don't change or stop asthma medicines, including steroids, without talking to your doctor. Who knows what you can do when you do more with less asthma? Ask your asthma specialist about Dupixent.
Verizon Small Business Days are coming from October 16th to the 22nd. Now is the time to partner with our experts. Get started today with Verizon Business. It's your business. It's your Verizon.
Innovation transforms the world, moving us forward not just in steps, but in leaps and bounds. Innovation created a healthcare system so extraordinary, it not only improves the lives of veterans, it transforms the lives of healthcare professionals, collaborating through integrated care teams, accessing the latest technology, working with the most advanced medical science, and even creating it. Like discovering new ways to integrate technology with the human body. It's a unique culture of transformation that leads to solutions that best serve our veterans. The Department of Veterans Affairs, where innovation ensures those who served our nation are served by the very best. See how a career at VA can transform your future.
You can't buy a best friend, but you can adopt one.
This is a hot flash. This is a hot flash. But this is a not flash. There's big news for women going through menopause. Veoza, a prescription treatment for moderate to severe vasomotor symptoms, the medical name for hot flashes and night sweats. With hormone-free Veoza, you can have fewer hot flashes and more not flashes. Veoza is proven to reduce the number and severity of hot flashes day and night. For some women, it can start working in as early as 1 week. Don't use Veoza if you have cirrhosis, severe kidney problems, kidney failure, or take CYP1A2 inhibitors. Increased liver blood test values may occur. Your doctor will check them before and during treatment. Most common side effects include stomach pain, diarrhea, difficulty sleeping, back pain, and hot flashes. Ask your doctor about hormone-free Veoza and enjoy more not flashes.
Closed captioning brought to you by InVet Help. Call 1-800-710-0020.
Do you have an invention idea but don't know what to do next? Call InVent Help today. They can help you get started with your idea.
Call now. 800-710-0020.
More than 270 Americans who had been stranded in Israel after the deadly Hamas attacks arrived in Florida Sunday night. They landed in Tampa on a flight chartered by a non-profit group and Florida Governor and U.S. Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis. He was there to greet the returning Americans on the tarmac and said there will be more charter flights to bring up to 1,000 Floridians home from Israel. Well, meantime, people took to the streets around the world this weekend to show their support for both Israelis and Palestinians. However, in Europe, pro-Palestinian rallies were most prevalent. In the Netherlands, police say more than 15,000 people gathered for this demonstration in Amsterdam. Authorities say one person was arrested for displaying the Hamas flag and 2 more for covering their faces and threatening officers. And in London Saturday, thousands marched to British broadcaster BBC's headquarters. The BBC says red paint was splattered over its main entrance to protest its coverage of the war. Dozens of bodies have been found in the Israeli kibbutz Be'eri near Gaza as details emerge of the horror that unfolded as Hamas launched their deadly surprise attack. CNN's Anderson Cooper spoke to one resident about that terrifying assault.
It was a nightmare. Nothing you can imagine. And you're locked in a quite a confined place, some of my friends and colleagues, families, have been even few. We actually been only two of us, my spouse, myself, and the dog. But I know 8 people crowded in this place, or even more. Everything is locked. You see nothing outside.
I should point out you live in Be'eri, which was attacked
Yes.
by Hamas very early on Saturday morning. It was the scene of horrific brutality by Hamas on the ground there, and you got to your safe room, and I know other members of your family got to their safe rooms as well. But you were on a WhatsApp group following every move that these terrorists were making as they moved around killing people.
Well, the kibbutz has an app for internal messages, mainly for the daily life. It's not about what's going on in the culture, what is about health care, and what about dining room, things like that. Add to that, as a family, we have our own family WhatsApp, and each one of us actually talking to other people. So you get a lot of information from a lot of places in the kibbutz. Add to that all my friends start calling me in the middle of this chaos, and I can't answer anyone because they see on the news what is going on, which is more than I can at the moment. So you sit there and you literally blind and just can imagine what is going on elsewhere. You get a message from one, please someone go to my mother's house, they breaking down the safe room door. Please go this to save my uncle, they burning down his house and smoke is coming into and they're going up the stairs. We hear Arabic shouting outside, and this kind of messages all over the kibbutz.
Horrifying stories there, one of so many. I want to thank you for your company. I'm Rosemary Church. Our coverage of Israel at war continues with Max Foster and Bianca Noldo next.
Choosing a treatment for your chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can be overwhelming. So ask your doctor about Botox. Botox prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine before they even start. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine treatment. So far, more than 5 million Botox treatments have been given to over 850,000 chronic migraine patients.
Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
In a survey, 92% of current users said they wish they talked to their doctor and started Botox sooner. So ask your doctor if Botox is right for you. Learn how AbbVie could help you save on Botox.
Providing healthcare to people who need it most. That's the simple but powerful purpose behind Doctors Without Borders. We treat wounded people in war zones, care for malnourished children, and provide safe reproductive healthcare. We're on the ground in emergencies, from Ukraine to Afghanistan. We put patients first, and we go where we're needed most. Because at Doctors Without Borders, we believe people deserve to be treated with compassion and dignity. We treat our patients completely free of charge and without regard to race, religion, or politics. Doctors Without Borders has provided free, life-saving medical care for over 50 years. And thanks to the 6 million people around the world who support our work, Doctors Without Borders will continue to put our patients first.
The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper is appointment viewing on Sunday nights. One whole story, one whole hour. The world's best journalists dig deeper into the stories they can't ignore. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper, next Sunday at 8 on CNN.
It can be hard to keep track of which vaccines are recommended and when. The Canadian Lung Association can help. Getting a COVID-19 booster shot this fall will help protect you against the more recent variants of the virus that causes COVID-19. This is especially important if you're one of the millions of Canadians living with chronic lung disease. If you're 65 or older, have a compromised immune system, or are otherwise at high risk, speak to your healthcare provider about getting vaccinated against pneumonia. For more information, visit lung.ca.
Hello.
Hello and welcome to our viewers joining us in the United States and all around the world. I'm Bianca Nobilo.
I'm Max Foster, joining you live from London with our continuing coverage of Israel at war. It's 9 a.m. here in London, 11 a.m. in Gaza, where an intensifying humanitarian crisis is prompting urgent diplomatic efforts.
In just the last few hours, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the US is actively working to ensure that the people of Gaza can get out of harm's way and get the humanitarian assistance they need. Israel has been pounding Hamas targets in Gaza since the militant group's deadly attacks, and tens of thousands of people have now fled northern Gaza.
But food, medicine and water are in short supply. The Director General of the Palestinian Red Crescent says hospitals face imminent shutdown since there's very little fuel left to run the generators.
And deliveries have been piling up on the Egyptian side of the Rafah border crossing, the only viable way in or out of Gaza. Blinken has promised that it will open, but the Israeli Prime Minister's office has denied that there are any arrangements for opening that critical crossing. Joining us now from Tel Aviv is Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, a spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces. Thank you for joining us this morning, sir.
Good morning, Bianca.
We have to ask the key question about this Rafah border crossing. What is the status of it at the moment, and can you justify continuing to attack Gaza while a humanitarian corridor that can provide aid or get people out is not yet operational?
Bianca, our operation is now in day 10. We are continuing to strike Hamas exactly where it is.
Getting a humanitarian corridor open for people of the Gaza Strip. For foreigners to get out, for helping people out. It's in the works, it's being discussed. Israel working to establish humanitarian zone in Gaza. Israel working to establish humanitarian zone in Gaza. Well, they're working on it. Working on it.
And currently the idea is continuing its activity against Hamas. We are determined to destroy Hamas and banish them from the realm of existence.
In terms of if the government, gave support to opening that crossing into Egypt, how easy would that be militarily, do you think? Obviously, you're not in control of the actual border, but the Egyptians are suggesting they don't want to send any aid trucks in for concern that the Israelis will attack those trucks.
Well, Max, I think it's clear that the IDF is a professional military. We are subordinate to the government. So if the government instructs us to cease fire, we cease fire. That's just how things work. But I think what we need to do is leave the diplomacy to the diplomats. We are very, very much in control of what we are doing. We're continuing our activity, striking Hamas, killing its operatives, its terrorists. Yes, we continue to do so even throughout the night. We've continued to strike their leaders. and deplete and destroy their terrorist capabilities. They are still trying. Just over the last 24 hours, there were 3 different incidents of terrorists that tried to engage in the south of Israel once more, and this is 10 days after the brutal massacre of families in their houses. So they are still trying to engage us, and our core mission is to seek them out, pursue them, and kill them.
There is broad concern internationally about this conflict spilling over and bringing in more parties, whether it's Hezbollah, Iran, etc. Can you give us an update about the reports of violence on your northern border, particularly skirmishes with Hezbollah?
We've seen repeated, and I would say increased and escalating efforts by Hezbollah on the border with Israel, between us and Lebanon, in order to challenge Israel. We believe it is under the instruction of Iran, and we have reinforced our positions on the border with Lebanon. And I would say that what Hezbollah is doing is jeopardizing the state of Lebanon. Everything that happens from Lebanese territory is under the responsibility and accountability of the state of Lebanon, and this is a very, very concerning and disturbing development. We are taking the necessary precautions. We will defend our civilians. We've just announced that we are evacuating anybody in a 2-kilometer distance, within the 2-kilometer distance on the border with Lebanon. So all of the civilians have been asked to leave from there. That's around 28 different communities along the border in order to keep them safe. That is what we're doing. And of course, the military forces, our IDF forces, I've reported to you over the last few days about the huge amount of forces, unprecedented, that the IDF has recruited in the state of emergency, some 300,000 soldiers and officers throughout the country. And indeed, some of those are positioned on the frontier with Lebanon in order to be prepared for a potential Hezbollah escalation. It is of concern. We are prepared, and we're taking the necessary steps in order to prevent that. I'd also say, though, that when Hezbollah does conduct a strike or an attack, or like they did yesterday with repeated anti-tank guided missiles targeting civilians, even across the border, we will respond, and we will respond with force. We have no interest in escalating the situation, but we won't permit that area to be further challenged. Now, that is of concern to us, but currently I would say we are still focused mostly on South, on Hamas, and I would say to Hezbollah, I would recommend to them, watch how we are decapitating Hamas, watch how we are destroying their capabilities, watch how we are pursuing their leaders. Do not cross that threshold, because it will be a dear price that you pay.
You've been very clear to us in previous interviews that Israel has a right to self-defense, and that's what this operation is all about. I just wanted to get your response to what the Egyptian president said, that it's actually tipped from self-defense to collective punishment of everyone in Gaza.
Well, I don't agree with that. Obviously, our operations are specifically guided to distinct between civilians and terrorists. This is exactly what we're doing when we evacuate and call for the evacuation of moving people to the south. It is precisely to keep civilians out of harm's way, whereas Hamas, on the other hand, for instance, are doing everything to prevent that. They are trying to keep them in harm's way. They are trying to make sure that there are more civilian casualties. We are doing it out of a concern for human life. We are doing it out of a concern for Israeli lives and Palestinian lives. Hamas, on the other hand, they have no regard for human life, Israeli or Palestinian, and they will continue to hide behind the civilians, and we will defend our civilians while we call on the people of Gaza, who are not our enemy. The people of Gaza are not our enemy. Hamas is the enemy. I would say Hamas is the enemy of all decent people, and they've done a huge letdown to the people of Gaza in their brutal massacre of Israeli innocent people, women, men, and children on the 7th of October, and the abduction of over 150 others into the Gaza Strip. So we are fighting a brutal, ruthless, merciless enemy, and we will defeat them.
Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, thank you so much indeed for joining us today from the IDF. Well, Claire's here. What stood out for you from that interview?
So I think the question now for Israel, and the question that you're getting from the international community, both as you pointed out, the president of Egypt, we've also got the UN Office for the High Commissioner for Human Rights saying any continued military operations by Israel have gone well beyond the limits of international law. I think now that we look at Gaza, potentially a breaking point, this is the point that aid agencies are making, Israel is going to face questions as to why, he said it, day 10 of this operation, but day 4 of the attempts to evacuate civilians, why did they wait so long to start those evacuation processes? And how do they justify the fact that this is now in this enclave, 500,000 people have been displaced, the UN agency operating in there says they simply cannot meaningfully help them all when they've come to the south. They don't have the means to do it. The hospitals may be just a day running out of fuel. I mean, this is a situation that's now spiraling so much that I think it threatens to muddy the water potentially of Israel's purpose here, which is, given the atrocities that Hamas, inflicted on the Israeli people, to try and stop them from ever being a threat again. I think that's the challenge that they're facing, certainly from a public relations point of view, and then practically as well. What happens if and when the Rafah border opens? Where would these people go, and how much aid can get in? How long will they keep the border open? I don't think anyone knows that at this point.
This weekend, we've had more warnings from various different regional partners and the US about the potential for this to escalate. We heard from Iran on Saturday saying that if this level of devastation in Gaza continues, if these attacks continue, that Iran wouldn't be able to remain an observer or bystander, I think the language was. The US is also now taking a slightly different rhetorical stance, impressing on Israel the importance of protecting civilians as much as they can and trying not to have collateral damage. They've moved a second aircraft carrier to the region as well. I mean, would you say that the global community is now increasingly expecting or desperately trying to avoid a spillover?
Yeah, I think that's where the focus is right now. Really intense diplomatic efforts, both over the weekend and now with Secretary Blinken apparently heading back into Israel today. He was in Egypt on Sunday. I think this is a key focus. We do see some intensified fighting, tit for tat sort of strikes across the border with Hezbollah. There are serious concerns that given the situation in Gaza, given that more and more news is coming out of there about how bad it is, that this will spill over. And obviously the US is both in terms of the rhetoric. It was interesting, the Biden comments in his 60 Minutes interview saying, he was confident that Israel would prioritize the safety of civilians. He was confident that they would act within the bounds of international humanitarian law. It almost sounded like an instruction rather than a statement. There is intensive lobbying, I think, behind the scenes on the US side for Israel to exercise some restraint here, even on the surface and in practice. They are making it very clear that they have Israel's back in lots of different practical ways as well.
It was interesting, the White House also said over the last 24 hours that they were pressing upon Israel the importance of protecting civilians in Gaza, but that they were not offering any instructions or interfering in the military planning. But it did actually sound like quite a firm instruction.
Yeah, I mean, I think intensive lobbying. But I think the other thing about this is that there's a significant lack of clarity, right? The fog of war is clearly in play here. We don't know what's happening at Rafah. There have been a lot of mixed messages there. It's clear. We've had pictures this morning of people gathering outside that border crossing. The US Embassy in Jerusalem said to people, it's up to you if you want to go there. You have to assess the safety. We don't know, it could open for a brief period of time or not. And in terms of the fog of war as well, it was interesting what Jake Sullivan said on CNN on Sunday, the US National Security Advisor. They don't have the pinpoint locations of these hostages within Gaza. There's a lot that isn't available in terms of information as to what's happening in there.
Claire Sebastian, thank you so much. US President Joe Biden is warning Israel against occupying Gaza, saying it would be a big mistake. His comments came Sunday as Israel prepares for a potential ground offensive in Gaza.
Israel is going after a group of people who engage in barbarism that is as consequential as the Holocaust. And so I think Israel has to respond. They have to go after Hamas. Now, Hamas is a bunch of cowards. They're hiding behind the civilians. They put all of their headquarters where civilians are and buildings and the like. But to the extent that they can separate out and avoid, I'm confident the Israelis are going to do everything in their power to avoid the killing of innocent civilians.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was invited invited President Biden to visit Israel soon. A source tells CNN the two sides are discussing the possibility of such a trip.
For the first time since the deadly Hamas attack last week, the Palestinian Authority has condemned the militants' actions. Palestinian news agency Wafa reports that Mahmoud Abbas said the actions of Hamas do not represent the Palestinian people.
Mr. Abbas also called for a rejection of violence and the release of prisoners on both sides of the conflict. Wafa says his comments came during a phone call with the President of Venezuela.
Israeli troops are continuing to gather near Gaza. The last time the IDF went into the enclave to target Hamas leaders was back in 2014.
Nick Robson looks back at the operation then and what Israel is planning now.
Close to Gaza, preparations underway for a much anticipated ground offensive.
Apologies. Sorry. I'm in great pain. I've been diagnosed with diverticulitis and I have a chronic brain injury that's causing me severe head pain. So apologies about my moaning and groaning you might hear as I create songs from news events and CNN and BBC.
An incursion. If they do, Major Ofek will be near the front.
We expect to go to war. We expect to destroy the terrorist organization Hamas, kill its government, and kill every last terrorist. That's what we plan to do, and that's how it will be.
The last time the IDF went into Gaza targeting Hamas's leaders was 2014. Ariel Bernstein was 21 in the Special Forces, one of the first to cross the border.
You're just afraid that there is something waiting for you at every corner.
But his experiences then have left him questioning the tactics today. Back then, he says, the IDF warned civilians to leave, and Hamas told them to stay, just as is happening now. But some had stayed. His orders, he says, assume the civilians had left.
So whoever you see is basically engaged in fighting or is involved in fighting, and therefore we call it engaging with fire with any home you enter, with any kind of shape of a person that you see from afar.
In many ways, Israel's actions are playing out just as they have in the past. 2021 gun positions freshly dug, back in use. And in Gaza, the civilian death toll, according to Palestinian health officials, already higher than in 2014. And like then, Israel is already facing huge international pressure to avoid more civilian casualties.
What we are doing is saying privately what we've said publicly, which is that all military operations should be conducted consistent with law of war, that civilians should be protected.
The problem the IDF says it faces, just like 2014, Hamas will be hiding among civilians.
The whole situation we're talking about with Gazan civilians forcibly embedded is another element of Hamas. Hamas has to be fully defeated.
So the responsibility is on them and not you?
The responsibility is on Hamas for their own civilians. Our responsibility is to eliminate Hamas's capabilities completely.
Major Ofek, pausing during training in a mocked-up Palestinian town, says they don't hurt innocents, only terrorists, but admits if he is sent into Gaza, avoiding civilian deaths won't be easy.
Do you think it's possible, though, to fight Hamas without civilians getting injured?
We're concerned with overthrowing the Hamas regime and killing the terrorists who are currently in Gaza. If it will be difficult, it will be difficult, not easy.
Outside the camp gates, as Israel's military ponder their next move, troops are saying their fond farewells. Nick Robertson, CNN, Southern Israel.
Still to come, the US says it won't send troops to fight in Israel, but it's still beefing up its military presence to send a message to the region.
Plus, aid workers say the situation in Gaza has descended into complete catastrophe. We'll speak to a Palestinian journalist and get a first-hand account.
If you
you lived or worked at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for at least 30 days from August 1953 through December 1987 and have been diagnosed with cancer, neurobehavioral effects, fertility issues, or more, you may qualify for financial compensation. A new law passed by Congress now allows veterans and survivors to seek damages for harm from exposure to contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. Call Saddle Rock Legal Group to discuss your case now.
Call 1-800-814-9977.
He was only 47. Aneurysm. Did he have life insurance? Do you? No. You gotta get on it. Check out SelectQuote. Trust me, the peace of mind, it's worth it.
Life insurance is too important to put off another day. That's why SelectQuote makes getting coverage you need easy for less than $1 a day. Now get up to a $2 million policy with no medical exam and same-day coverage.
Visit SelectQuote.com. We shop you save.
Some things are big, others are huge. It's Empire Today's half-price sale. Get $2,400 of flooring for $1,200, $5,200 for an amazing $2,600. That's half the price of your entire purchase. Shop for carpet, hardwood, vinyl, and laminate right from home and have it professionally installed. Don't miss Empire's half-price sale. Schedule now.
800-588-2300 Empire.
Today.
This or that, this or that, this or that, this or that. You can do this, when you anti that. You can do this, when you anti that. You can do this, when you anti that. You can do this, cause that's where it's at.
Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Get started today at Angie.com. Choosing a treatment for your chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can be overwhelming. So ask your doctor about Botox. Botox prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine before they even start. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine treatment. So far, more than 5 million Botox treatments have been given to over 850,000 chronic migraine patients.
Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
In a survey, 92% of current users said they wish they talked to their doctor and started Botox sooner. So ask your doctor if Botox is right for you. Learn how AbbVie could help you save on Botox.
Introducing Finish Ultimate. Engineered for the ultimate clean in the toughest conditions. Dry burnt-on stains. Old dishwashers. Very hard water. Even when you skip the rinse. Its new Cycle Sync technology releases the right ingredient at the right time. And Finish Ultimate breaks down stains, cuts grease, and boosts shine for the ultimate clean, even in the toughest conditions.
Sustainably caught salmon in every bite. Jinx is real dog food made by real dog people.
Israel's military has confirmed Hamas fighters are holding at least 155 hostages. Hamas kidnapped men, women and children during the surprise attack last weekend, and it's not clear where they're being held and under what conditions.
Families of the missing met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday. They're urging him and the government to do whatever they can to bring their loved ones home safely. The families of US hostages are also asking the White House to take immediate action to get their loved ones home. Some have formed a group calling itself the Families of American Israeli Hostages in Gaza.
They met with the US President and Secretary of State last week. US officials say the best plan is to work with Israel to secure the release of all the hostages.
All we can do is to continue to work closely with the Israeli government on hostage recovery options, which we are doing, and then work through third countries to see if there are avenues for release. Those efforts are underway. Our hope is that they can produce results. We will continue to stay focused on this. It's as high a priority as the president has.
Meantime, an American woman who says 6 of her family members were kidnapped by Hamas called for their release on Sunday, just days after speaking at the United Nations and pleading for their return.
The families of American hostages held prisoner in Gaza. The families of American hostages held prisoner in the Gaza Strip want answers, want deals, bringing them home. The families of American hostages held prisoner by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. They want answers really quick. Come on, they want to hear from you. Come on, they want to hear from you. Make a deal and get them out. The families of American hostages held prisoner by Hamas in the Gaza Strip.
In Gaza or in part of a sort of hostage rescue operations. But what it's doing right now is a show of force, a show of unity with these carrier strike groups sitting in the waters off the coast. A clear, very clear message to other groups in the region, not even just Hamas, but Hezbollah, groups in Syria as well, as a deterrent to try to keep them from getting involved. Now we do know that the Americans already have on the ground.
That's a song by Paul Beckman, Polly Rainbow Song, also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world, created October 16th, 2023. For an explanation of my mainstream name, Paul Beckman, New Age name, Polly Rainbow Song, and when I utter, also by the new and first leader of humankind in the free world, please go to Internet Solutions and Songs 24-7 at Palu Rainbow Song bio on YouTube, and then look for a playlist called Movie Song Reviews by Palu. There, look for some videos and song videos categorized as a special note. That should give you an explanation of all that, plus more. Thank you very much. Namaste, honor to the divine and all.